Kody Brown looked directly into that camera and said with complete conviction, with real emotion in his eyes, that he would lay down his life for any one of his children. Every single one. And the thing is, you could tell he meant it. That was not a performance. That was a man who genuinely believed what he was saying at that moment. He would die for Truly Brown. He just would not drive to her house on a Wednesday. And that gap between the life he claimed he would sacrifice and the ordinary afternoon he consistently failed to show up for is the single most clarifying measurement of Kody Brown's fatherhood. Not the speeches, not the confessionals, not the grand declarations. Wednesday. The unremarkable, unfilmed, nobody is watching Wednesday. That is where the truth of a parent lives. And that is exactly where Kody Brown was not. If that hits you somewhere real, if you already know where this is going, and you feel it, please hit that like button right now and subscribe to Sister Wives Crew. We do not do surface level here. We go to the place the show never quite reached. Stay with me. Now, let's go back to the beginning, because to understand what happened to Truly, you have to understand something about how Kody Brown has always expressed love. From the very first seasons of Sister Wives, Kody was a man who operated in the cinematic world. Big speeches, sweeping visions, emotional declarations, delivered to a camera with the confidence of someone who has never once doubted that his feelings, stated loudly enough, counted as action. And there is something genuinely compelling about that. Early Kody, chaotic, enthusiastic, building this enormous, unconventional family with what looked like genuine passion, was magnetic television. You watched him and you thought, this man loves his family. He is loud about it. He is proud of it. He performs it constantly. And performance, when you are young and building something, can look almost indistinguishable from the real thing. The problem with performance is that it photographs beautifully, and it vanishes the moment the camera turns off. There is a version of love that makes extraordinary television. Grand declarations, tears in a confessional, the kind of sentence that gets clipped and shared and quoted for years. Kody Brown was exceptional at that version. He was a natural. He gave it freely and often, and with what appeared to be genuine feeling behind it. That version of love, the filmed version, the milestone version, the show up for the birthday episode version, is real in its own limited way. And then there is the other version. The version that does not photograph at all. The version that is just a car appearing in a driveway on an ordinary Tuesday. A father at the dinner table on a Thursday, when nothing significant is happening. A child who comes home from school and finds, simply, that her parents are there. Not because there is a camera, not because it is a milestone, just because she is a child and he is her father. And this is what fathers do. That version, the ordinary, repeated, undramatic version, is what builds something. That version is what a child's nervous system learns to rely on. That version is what creates the internal understanding, wired deep before language can even describe it, that you are worth showing up for. Not on your birthday, not when the cameras are rolling, on Wednesdays. On the unremarkable days that leave no record and produce no content and mean everything. Kody Brown failed completely at the second version, and Truly Brown needed the second version more than any child on that show. Here is something that parenting research has established with remarkable consistency, and it is worth slowing down for because it reframes everything you are about to hear. Children do not primarily bond with their parents through extraordinary moments. They bond through repetition. The same bedtime routine, the same joke was told in the same way at the dinner table, the same face appears at school pickup, again and again, until the child stops consciously registering it because it has become the foundation beneath everything else. Reliable, expected, simply there. Developmental psychologists call the mechanism behind this contingent responsiveness. It means being present consistently in response to a child's ordinary daily needs. Not the crises, not the celebrations, the in-between. Wednesday. The contingent responsiveness is what teaches a child that the world is safe, that people who say they love you actually remain in the vicinity of your life, that love is not an announcement, it is a pattern. Kody Brown's fatherhood, documented across 18 seasons of footage and corroborated by Christine's accounts in the aftermath of her departure, was built almost entirely on the milestone and the emergency. He arrived for the significance. He was present for the drama, and the Wednesday, the unremarkable, unfilmed, ordinary Wednesday that is, where Truly Brown's attachment needed to be constructed. brick by ordinary brick. That is where her father was not. Now, someone in the comments is already typing something about logistics, about how difficult it is to maintain presence across multiple households, about how Kody was managing 4 families and the structural impossibility of being everywhere at once. And that point is worth addressing directly, because it is the defense that surfaces every single time this conversation happens, and it deserves a real answer rather than dismissal. The logistics argument would hold if the evidence showed a man consistently straining against an impossible structure, trying every available option, present as much as the system allowed. That is not what the evidence shows. What the evidence shows across episode documentation, across Christine's direct statements, across the trajectory of the family's disintegration, is a man who had preferences about where he wanted to be, and who found, season after season, that those preferences consistently aligned with one household and consistently diverged from Christine's. This was not a man failing under an impossible burden. This was a man making choices, repeatedly, over the years. And the choices, assembled into a pattern, told Christine's children something their father's speeches could not undo. They told truly something. Think about the mathematics of childhood for a moment, because the numbers here are not abstract. They are the actual architecture of a human life. From birth to age 18, a child experiences approximately 6,570 days. 6,570 mornings of waking up and needing a parent to exist reliably somewhere near them. 6,570 evenings that will, in aggregate, become their understanding of what home means and what love looks like in practice. Kody Brown's greatest hits as a father are retrievable. They are in the archive. The birthday appearances, the filmed moments of connection, the confessional declarations, they exist, and they were real expressions of something. And no one here is arguing that Kody Brown felt nothing. The feelings were real. The feelings were just insufficient. Because against 6,570 days of childhood, the documented milestone appearances are a rounding error. Truly, Brown did not grow up in Kody's greatest hits. She grew up in the space between them. In the 6,000 days, nobody filmed. On Wednesday afternoons, when a car did not appear in the driveway, in the ordinary evenings that passed without her father's presence. Each one individually small, collectively enormous. And here is where the story changes. Because there was a moment in this family's history that functioned as the ultimate test of exactly this question. Not the dramatic question of whether Kody would sacrifice his life, but the practical question of whether he would show up for the ordinary, whether he would find the Wednesday when the Wednesday required actual effort. That moment was COVID. When Kody Brown announced his quarantine protocols, the rules that effectively ended his rotation between households, he presented this as a safety decision. And safety, during a genuine global health crisis, was a legitimate consideration. No one is disputing that. What is worth examining carefully, specifically, without letting the safety framing do work it does not deserve, is what the protocols actually produced, and what they revealed about where Kody's preferences resided. Across this country, during that same period, parents who were separated, divorced, working multiple jobs, navigating custody arrangements designed for a different world, found ways to maintain a safe, consistent presence in their children's lives. They drove with masks. They sat in the backyards. They video called every single day. They stood outside windows when nothing else was possible. They found the Wednesday. Because the Wednesday was non-negotiable, because their children needed them to find it, because showing up in whatever modified, inconvenient, logistically complicated form was not optional. Kody Brown found a reason Wednesday was not possible, and then he stayed at Robin's house. For the duration, while truly waited. Let that sequence sit for a moment, because what it reveals is not a man overwhelmed by impossible circumstances. What it reveals is a man whose genuine, revealed preference, not his stated preference, his revealed preference, the one shown by his actual choices under pressure, was not Truly's Wednesday. And children understand revealed preferences with a precision that no speech can override. They do not process what you say you would do, they process what you do. Repeatedly. On ordinary days, on Wednesdays. There is a number I want to give you, and I want you to really hear it before we move forward, because this number has not been stated plainly on any major platform covering this story, and it needs to be said out loud. Based on documented visit frequencies to Christine's household in the final seasons before the divorce, the seasons where the pattern had already calcified, where Kody's presence in that home had dwindled to what fans and Christine herself described. Truly Brown was receiving an estimated single-digit number of hours of one-on-one father-daughter time per month. Not per week, per month. Single digits. She was 8 years old. She was in what developmental researchers identify as primary attachment years, the years when the pattern gets wired, when the child's understanding of whether she is worth showing up for gets built into something durable and foundational. And her father, who lived in the same city, who had no employment requiring travel, who was a full-time cast member of a television show about his family, was present for single-digit hours per month. He would lay down his life for her. He gave her single-digit hours per month? Hold that comparison. Do not let it slide into abstraction. Hold the specific image of an 8-year-old girl in her primary attachment years, in the same city as her father, receiving the equivalent of a long weekend's worth of his time spread across 30 days. And then hold the image of that same father in a confessional, with perfect lighting and genuine emotion, explaining that he would die for his children. The distance between those two images is not hypocrisy in the simple sense. It is something more specific and more damaging. It is what happens when a person becomes so fluent in the language of extraordinary love that they lose the ability to notice the ordinary love has stopped. When the speech becomes so real to the speaker that it substitutes, in their own internal accounting, for the showing up. When you can feel the feeling of being a devoted father while a child in your same city waits for a Wednesday that does not come. That is where we are at the halfway point of this story, and where we go next into the specific rationalizations Kody deployed, into what the fan community has been documenting for years, and into what is happening in Truly's life right now, is where the full picture assembles. Stay with me. There is a phrase that surfaces in Kody Brown's reasoning across multiple seasons, deployed in various forms, always doing the same work. You have heard it before. You have probably used it yourself at some point, or had it used on you, because it is one of the most culturally accepted rationalizations in the entire vocabulary of modern parenting. The phrase is quality over quantity. And when Kody applied it to his time with Christine's children, when he leaned on it as the philosophical framework that explained why less presence was actually fine, was actually sufficient, was actually perhaps even better than more presence, he was not lying. He genuinely believed it. That is the most important thing to understand about this phrase and the damage it does. The people who deploy it almost always believe it. They believe it because it is convenient to believe, and because our culture has handed it to them pre-assembled, requiring no examination, carrying the authority of something that sounds wise. Here is what child development research actually says about that philosophy when applied to a child under 10 years old. It does not work. Not in the way the phrase implies. Not in the way Kody needed it to work. Quality time is real. The quality of engaged, attentive presence absolutely matters. No researcher disputes that. What the research also shows, consistently and without significant dissent, is that quality time requires a minimum threshold of quantity below which quality becomes structurally impossible. You cannot deliver a meaningful, attachment-building presence in single-digit monthly hours. The math does not permit it. Neuroscience does not permit it. A child's developing attachment system does not care about your intentions or your philosophy. It responds to the pattern. It responds to the repetition. It responds to Wednesday. Truly Brown was below the threshold by a significant margin, and quality over quantity was the sentence that made it sound acceptable to Kody, to the audience, possibly even to Kody's own internal accounting of himself as a father. It was a reasonable mask on something that was not reasonable at all. And here is the thing about reasonable masks. They are far more dangerous than obvious failures. When a parent fails obviously, dramatically, in a way everyone can see and name, the child at least receives the clarity of an undeniable truth. This person failed me. That is painful, but it is legible. The child can build understanding on that legibility. What quality over quantity does is introduce doubt into the child's processing. It says, maybe this is enough. Maybe my need for more is the problem. Maybe the standard amount of father distributed correctly is what I am receiving, and my wanting more is excessive. It takes the wound and makes it the child's interpretation problem rather than the parent's presence problem. Truly Brown deserved clarity. She did not receive clarity. She received philosophy. Now let's talk about what the Sister Wives audience has been doing with this information, because the fans of this show and I want to say this clearly and with genuine respect, have been applying a version of the Wednesday test to Kody Brown for years, without ever calling it that. The fan community assembled this case from the available evidence with a patience and specificity that the show's own producers never quite matched. They went back to episodes, they tracked the visit patterns, they cross-referenced Christine's statements with what was documented on screen. They asked the question that the show's dramatic framing consistently obscured. Not did Kody show up for the milestone, but what happened the week before? The week after? The unremarkable weeks that the production schedule did not prioritize and the narrative arc did not require? And the answer they assembled across years of discussion, across forum threads and comment sections and dedicated analysis channels was consistent. The gap between Kody's declarations and Kody's documented presence in Christine's household was not a secret. It was visible in the footage. It was visible in the way Christine's demeanor shifted across seasons. It was visible in the particular kind of tiredness that settled into her face. Not the tiredness of a woman dealing with a difficult situation, but the tiredness of a woman who has stopped expecting something and is quietly grieving the expectation itself. The fandom did the math. The math was correct, and it was the fandom, not the production, not the editing, not Kody's eventual reckoning with his own choices, that first named the pattern clearly enough for the wider audience to recognize it. That collective documentation matters because it is what makes this conversation possible at a level of specificity that actually serves Truly's story. We are not speculating here. We are assembling documented evidence into a picture that the show's format, which required Kody to remain sympathetic enough to sustain audience interest, was never fully allowed. Now, I want to go to something that rarely gets discussed in conversations about Kody and Truly, and it requires a certain delicacy, because we are talking about a child. A real child, not a character, not a narrative device, a person who did not choose to be born into a filmed family, and who has had her attachment experience documented and discussed by strangers for her entire childhood. That matters. The way we talk about Truly's experience has to be in service of the truth of her experience, not in service of making a point about Kody. So here is the truth, stated as carefully as I know how to state it. Children who experience inconsistent paternal presence during primary attachment years do not simply feel sad about it in a way that resolves cleanly. The experience organizes itself. It becomes part of how the child understands what love looks like, what they should expect from the people who claim to love them, what the relationship is between someone's stated feelings and their actual behavior. A child who consistently receives less than they need from a parent does not, in most cases, conclude that the parent is the problem. Children are not equipped to make that conclusion safely. It destabilizes everything they depend on. Instead, they adjust their expectations. They learn to need less. They develop a fluency in the gap between what someone says they feel and what that person actually does. And they file that fluency away in a part of themselves that will surface much later, in adult relationships, in moments of intimacy when someone makes a promise and the child who became an adult waits to see whether the Wednesday comes. This is not a guaranteed outcome. Children are resilient in ways that consistently surprise researchers. Protective factors exist. Stable mothers, consistent alternative caregivers, community, the simple fact of being genuinely loved by someone who shows up. Christine Brown showed up every Wednesday, without speeches, without confessionals, without cameras. Just there, in the driveway, in the kitchen, at the school, again and again. The most undramatic and essential thing a parent can do. And now there is someone else showing up for Truly's Wednesdays. And this is the part of the story that deserves to be said plainly, without sentimentality, but also without minimization, because it is genuinely significant. David Woolley is showing up for Truly Brown's Wednesdays. Right now. Not theoretically, not in the language of sacrifice and devotion delivered to a camera, in the ordinary, documented, social media visible reality of a reconstructed family life in Utah. The family photos, the ordinary content of their days, the presence that does not announce itself because the presence that has to announce itself is already doing something other than simply being there. What you see when you look at the documentation of Truly's life post-Christine's departure from the plural marriage is a child who has ordinary days now, who has consistency, who has a stepfather who appears in the background of her life the way functional parents appear. Not as a dramatic presence, not as a milestone, but as furniture. The reliable, expected, simply there furniture of a functioning family. That ordinariness, that beautiful, undramatic, easily overlooked ordinariness is exactly what Truly's childhood required, and what her father failed to provide. There is no speech David Woolley has made to a camera about what he would sacrifice for Truly Brown. There does not need to be. Wednesday is the speech. The Wednesday, repeated, is the most complete declaration of parental love that exists. And Truly Brown, who understands the difference between the declaration and the Wednesday with a precision most adults never develop, is receiving the Wednesday now. Here's what I think deserves to be said about Kody Brown at this point in the conversation. Because this is not a simple story, and he is not a simple villain, and leaving him as a caricature does not serve the truth of what happened. Kody Brown is a man who genuinely loves his children in the way he is capable of loving them. Loudly, dramatically, in the language of sacrifice and devotion, in the cinematic register that has always been his native emotional tongue. That love is real. It is also, measured against what his children actually needed, deeply insufficient. And the insufficiency is not the result of malice. It is the result of a man who was never asked, by anyone in his life, to examine the gap between his emotional declarations and his practical presence, who was handed a self-image as a devoted patriarch and never had to defend that self-image against the Wednesday test. The tragedy of Kody Brown, and there is a genuine tragedy here beneath the easy criticism, is that he appears to genuinely believe he was a good father, that the speeches counted, that the feelings counted, that the theoretical sacrifice counted, that quality over quantity held. The self-image was so complete, so culturally reinforced by the patriarchal narrative he inhabited, that the evidence against it assembled across 18 seasons of footage and the departure of 3 wives and the estrangement of multiple children could not penetrate it. He looked at Truly's childhood and saw devotion. He missed Wednesday. He always misses Wednesday. And Christine Brown, who spent years trying to bridge that gap, years of asking for presents that did not come, years of watching her daughter wait for a car that did not appear in the driveway, Christine finally did the thing that the Wednesday test eventually demands. She stopped waiting for someone else to show up, and she built the life that would show up instead. She took Truly somewhere that Wednesday existed, somewhere those ordinary days were filled with the ordinary presence of a person who was simply, consistently, undramatically there. That decision, not dramatic, not filmed with perfect lighting, not delivered in a confessional, is the most profound act of parental love in this entire story. Christine Brown chose Truly's Wednesday over her own settled life. She rebuilt everything so that her daughter could have the ordinary. And the ordinary, for Truly Brown, was everything. There is one more thing I want to say before we get to where you come in, and it is the thing this entire conversation has been building toward without quite naming directly. The Wednesday test is not about sister wives. Not really. It is not even about Kody Brown, ultimately. It is about the gap that exists in so many families, in so many childhoods, in so many adults who are walking around right now carrying the specific weight of a parent who would have done anything for them except the ordinary thing. Except Wednesday, the parent who made grand gestures and missed school plays, who would have taken a bullet and could not manage a Tuesday evening, who said "I love you" with complete sincerity, and then disappeared into their own life, their own preferences, their own version of the story in which they were present when the evidence said otherwise. That gap, Kody's gap, your parents' gap, the gap that lives in the space between the declaration and the driveway, is one of the most common unspoken wounds in human experience, and it rarely gets named with this kind of specificity. It gets called complicated, or it gets minimized by the quality over quantity philosophy, or it gets buried under the mythology of the extraordinary gesture, good intentions, the genuine feelings, the love that was real but insufficient, the sacrifice that was always theoretically available and practically absent. Truly Brown's story names it. With 18 seasons of documented evidence, with the specificity of a single-digit monthly hour count, with the clarity of COVID protocols that found a permanent address at one house while another child waited. Truly's story names the Wednesday wound with a precision that most people who carry it have never encountered. And that precision The ability to look at your own experience and say, yes, that is what happened to me. It had a shape, and I can see the shape now. That precision is the beginning of something. It is the beginning of not passing it on. It is the beginning of showing up for your own Wednesdays. For the people in your life who need the ordinary version of you, not the cinematic version, not the speech, the driveway, the dinner table, the face that appears again and again until it becomes the foundation beneath everything else. That is what truly is receiving now. That is what Christine built for her. That is what David Woolley is quietly, undramatically, consistently providing. And that quiet consistency, unremarkable, unfilmed, repeated forever, is the answer to every speech Kody Brown ever delivered to a camera. No declaration required. Just Wednesday. And now you. Because this video does not end with Kody Brown. It ends with you. And with the question the Wednesday test always eventually asks. Have you been the child waiting for the Wednesday that never came? Have you had a parent or a partner or a friend who would theoretically sacrifice everything but could not manage the ordinary showing up? Who loved you loudly and missed you quietly? Who made the grand gesture and skipped Tuesday? If this video touched something real in your own story, if you recognized the gap, if you felt the shape of it, drop a line in the comments. You do not have to explain it. You do not have to write the paragraph. The emoji says enough, and the people who need to see it will see it and know they are not alone in it. If this kind of specific, unflinching analysis is what you come to this channel for, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that this conversation matters, that the specificity matters, that the audience for this kind of honesty is real and large and deserves more of it. Share this video with someone who still defends Kody Brown's good intentions. Not to argue with them, just to offer them the Wednesday test and let them sit with it. And subscribe to Sister Wives Crew, because Topic 22 goes somewhere we have not gone before on this channel. There is a single sentence that Kody Brown said. One sentence, documented, retrievable, not taken out of context, that reveals more about his fatherhood than 18 seasons of footage assembled together. One sentence. And when you hear it framed the way we are going to frame it, it changes the way you read everything that came before it. Not a speech, not a confessional, one sentence. We will see you there.